The New Jersey Statehouse Watch is on. From Trenton, we explain what's happening inside the Statehouse, speaking directly with legislators, policymakers, and budget experts to bring you the facts behind the decisions.
There's no doubt that energy bills are about to skyrocket this summer.
$300 million to Newark billionaires? That ain't cutting it for rural New Jersey. Enough of it.
With your hosts, Jack Brangan and Constance Ditzel. So stick around. Here's Jack and Connie.
Protection is not just a choice, it is a right. Stand firm and protect what is yours.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Brangan, and you have arrived here at the New Jersey Statehouse Watch, and I'm here with Constance Ditzel.
Ja.
Constance, how are you doing?
Ich bin sehr gut.
Okay, it's glad you can tell she's been on vacation. We're going to get a little bit of a book report in a few minutes about her vacation. It might have been in Germany. I'm not sure, but so we're going to talk about the Second Amendment tonight. And first of all, I want to thank and congratulate our speed writing girl. She did a great job, with all of her drawing on the whiteboard.
I thought that was pretty cool.
And actually putting 2 lines at the very bottom of that in one pass. It's a gift that she has. It's quite amazing. But I just want to make a comment about the show tonight. When we started conceiving the New Jersey Statehouse Watch, we had 2 goals. One, we wanted to focus completely on New Jersey. No national news. All we wanted to do was focus on what's going on in Trenton. We both agreed that when we ran for our assembly positions, most of the people, citizens, they just have no idea what's going on in Trenton. So that was the motivation behind the show. The second thing was that we would bring on subject matter experts. And tonight we have Joe LoPorto. He's going to talk about what he does for a living, but it's all, if there is an expert on the Second Amendment and the laws in New Jersey concerning the Second Amendment, Joe is the expert. So I think this will be a great show tonight. No doubt that there's miles and miles of jurisprudence case law around the Second Amendment, and we're going to sort of narrow this a little bit. We're not going to talk about things like, the magazine, whether you should have 20 rounds versus 10 rounds, or those subjects, who commits the violence. Is it the guns, or it is the people carrying the gun? We're not going to deal with those issues. We're going to talk about what it's going to take to get a firearm, to get a concealed carry in New Jersey. But before we do that, you did go on vacation, so why don't you tell us a little bit, give us a book report on what you did on your vacation.
Meine Damen und Herren, ich war in Deutschland und da haben wir sehr heißes Wetter gehabt. Viel heißer als hier, also fast 90 Grad. Und das ist unheimlich, das ist nicht üblich. Das ist viel wärmer. Here normalerweise.
You are back in America.
Yes. So
we have a bilingual co-host here. So.
What was really interesting is it was much, much hotter than usual. It was like 99 degrees, which is very unusual there. Yeah. And we've had that kind of weather occasionally, but they're not accustomed to it. It's just getting hotter and hotter. The political climate is listen, here I am. The political climate is also hot.
Oh,
and you want to hear about that a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
What's interesting is that I wanted to get people's views. And these are people I've known for well over 40 years. So I'm not talking to complete strangers. It was a mix of Irish, German, Polish, English. So I got various views. And it's not like I want to get into political discussion because I was there for other reasons. But one of the things I noticed right off the bat is there was always this love of the U.S. And you didn't feel the love anymore. And they were very careful to say it's not the people, but they don't love the U.S. like they used to. And their first example was fear on their face. Well, we just can't travel to the U.S. anymore. I go, what do you mean? Well, there's a good chance that we won't be able to go back home. I said, well, why would you say that? Do you have a passport? Yeah. Are you coming just for vacation? Well, why would that happen? Oh, well, we've seen on the news that we can be turned around and sent back. It happened to one German couple. And I said, well, maybe there was something with a couple. There must have been a reason or not, but it's got to be an anomaly. But they just are completely bought in.
Yeah.
This is CNN International doing their work over there. So that's one thing. But so what I did, I was kind of interested to hear their stance on things without talking about the current administration. So I was talking about the invasion of our borders.
Right.
And they were right away on board with that. Yeah, that's a problem here too. It's really serious when they come across because they can't work right away. They take advantage of the services and the medical and the healthcare, but they can't work for 6 to 12 months. So I said, so you're kind of on board. They said, yeah, we agree with what we're doing there.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay. And then I said, what about voter ID? Would you agree that you should have to have a voter ID to vote and that you should prove you're a citizen? Oh, yeah, that's what we do here. Well, let me tell you, that's a big point of controversy in our country right now.
So now they're MAGA.
They could not understand why it would be discrimination against a woman that would have to get a birth certificate or simply an affidavit. And a lot of people don't know that, by the way, that you don't have to produce a birth certificate, just an affidavit saying, yes, I changed my name will suffice. That's a requirement in the SAVE Act.
Okay.
It's just, so there's that. And they said, yeah, we agree with you there. Then they talked about abortion. It was so horrible that abortion isn't allowed in our country anymore after Dobbs Ferry. And I go to research and I found out that Germany doesn't allow it after 3 or 4 months, requires some counseling. And I said, did you know in New Jersey you can abort a child up to 9th month, no questions asked? They were horrified.
Yeah.
So they agreed with me on all these policies. They agreed with me on the parental rights thing, that a minor under 18 should not be able to make decisions to have behavioral health care.
Yeah.
They agreed that if a suicide hotline is contacted, they contact the parents.
Right.
So while they supposedly don't agree with with the president, they agree with all of his policies. And they did say, we understand that he's doing best domestically for your country and that it was right for him to pull out of NATO and step back.
Right.
So they're basically, they're basically
They're
supporting
Trump
the platform,
supporters in philosophy.
philosophy, but not the person. And I did think it was interesting that they were happy to concede where we thought, they thought we were doing things right.
Yeah, it's a shame about the warped view that CNN International is giving the Europeans.
Yeah.
And that sort of came to light during the World Cup.
Right.
Because when the Europeans came over and discovered how wonderful this country is, they were delighted and overwhelmed. Right. And probably hated to go back home.
Yeah. And I arrived the night of that Ceuta upheaval in Spain. That was the same day I arrived. Yeah. When those 50,000 men, and that was a skewed thing. And yet I could find news that kind of, anyway, I won't go to that, but it was interesting to hear these topics from another standpoint.
Okay. So let's bring Joe in. Joe's in the green room. And I do want to sort of categorize, put a framework around our discussion after Joe comes on. But let's bring him in first.
There he is.
There he is. Joe, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Jack. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here with your audience.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's wonderful you're here. So before we get going, tell us the roles that you play here. There's, I know you wear a couple hats.
I do.
Some are in New Jersey, and some go beyond the borders.
Yeah, that's right. So as far as the state of New Jersey is concerned, I'm one of the founders and the director of legal operations for New Jersey Firearm Owners Syndicate, www.njfos.org for anyone that wants to check us out. And in my capacity there, I oversee the litigation portfolio for the organization, which is to say, coordinating our litigation efforts to essentially sue the state of New Jersey to the extent that their laws come in conflict with the core understanding of the Second Amendment. And we have sued the state of New Jersey over a number of issues and will continue to do so as long as the state defends its unconstitutional laws here. So that is most of the work that I do here. I'm also a lobbyist and state director for the National Rifle Association, and in that capacity, I work in state houses across the Northeast, representing the NRA and our members as it relates to both our lobbying efforts in those states in terms of making sure that our voices are heard in legislation that moves through those states, and also overseeing all of our PAC activities and coordinating on elections. So I said, I wear a lot of hats, and I get to participate in this process in a variety of places. So I get some broader perspective, I guess, as a result of that.
Sure, it's very exciting, with all the, there's always turmoil around the Second Amendment. For our discussion tonight, just to put a little framework around it, because there really is so much to talk about it. I sort of see three camps of people. There are those people that have already decided about firearms, and they are concealed carry, or they have hunting guns and that sort of thing. So that's that camp. There's another camp that'll never have a gun in their house, that they're just don't want anything to do with guns at all. And then there's a big camp in the center where I think most people fall, and these are the curious. These are the people that maybe are thinking about getting a gun, but they don't even know what to do with regard to the first step. They see people around them that are concealed carry, and I know at work there were several people that I knew for years. They were programmers and database people, and lo and behold, after 2 years, I find out they're concealed carry folks. So people are thinking about this, and there's good reason. In New Jersey, it's a sanctuary state, and there is a certain level of violence that has permeated the state. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but there's no town in the state that is immune from the violence from what's come into the state from the illegal alien standpoint. And I would refer people back to our podcast that Constance and I did on July 14th. It's called New Jersey's War on Kids, and it's the 10 worst laws. And during that podcast, we go through multiple towns and counties that have been victims of violent crime from illegal aliens. And these are the people now that maybe never thought about getting a gun or considering it. And some of the towns, aren't there about 10?
Yeah, the top 10. In fact, a lot of them are in South Jersey, but the top 10 are, and this is the most violent crime rates, way above the national average in the country. Atlantic City, Camden, Salem and Penns Grove, Bridgeton, Newark, Passaic, New Brunswick or Trenton, Orange, Pleasantville, and Patterson. And they have the most children living in poverty, the lowest median income. They have the most not graduating from high school, and these violent crime rates. And these are all Democrat-run cities, by the way.
So if I throw it to you, Joe, from what you can see, what is the maybe the main reasons that people get firearms, number one? And for those folks that are thinking, I do want to get a gun, I do want to become a concealed carry gun owner, what do you have to do in New Jersey? What steps do you have to take to do this legally?
Yeah, sure. And maybe before I go into the details, I'll certainly weigh in on some of the statistics and the issues that you raised there. I mean, we, as you say, there are certainly camps of folks out there that have been, long entrenched in the firearm sort of aspect of life in America that is just part of the culture and heritage of being an American. I grew up, with a love for hunting and the outdoors, so I have been somebody who is connected to that heritage and that component of life as we understand it here from my childhood. I don't know it any other way. But as you say, things have certainly changed. I mean, New Jersey, we estimate that there's approximately 1 million gun owners in the state of New Jersey. Now, there was a fairly significant uptick in that, especially in the sort of post-COVID era, in that initial aftermath of COVID, when it suddenly appeared that the government wasn't coming to save anyone. Well, lo and behold, New Jersey residents and Americans across the United States who perhaps had not previously really thought about what I should be thinking about as it relates to my own personal security and safety, all of a sudden, like, it became a very real concern. And we saw a huge uptick in sales and new gun owners coming to the table, coming from different demographics. Some of them coming from those exact jurisdictions that you mentioned. I mean, there's a healthy number of in the thousands of concealed carry permit holders in Newark now. And that is in part in reaction to the combination of this sort of sequence of events. And blue states like New Jersey, that they focus their firearms policy on sort of blaming law-abiding citizens for the problems that occur in society. But at the same time, as you say, look, they pursue these pro-crime policies that turn people out on the street, cashless bail.
That's right.
All of the reforms that were introduced under the guise of social justice reform have only made our communities more dangerous. And so, you have this confluence. The state wants to, put repeat offenders back out onto the street, but they simultaneously want to make it as hard as possible for you, a law-abiding, peaceable person, to protect yourself and your family. And those two policy choices are in stark contrast to each other.
Right.
So what are the 3 steps that do make it rather difficult? You said there are 3 steps, and what is the one-line definition to conceal carry in the 3 New Jersey has put in place?
So, I mean, New Jersey, by comparison, I mean, in the rest of the country, there are roughly 28 states in the United States that have what's known as permitless carry, right? There is no process. If you live in one of those states, all firearms transactions that occur through a dealer, there is a background check requirement to that. So if you're just somebody who said, I feel like I should have some way to protect myself, right? And you're in a free state, you would just simply go to your local gun store, you fill out a federal form 4473, that dealer takes that information, conducts an instant background check. You pay for your item, and then you walk out the door, and you're a free citizen to exercise your rights.
All right. Are these the constitutional carry states?
That would be in states that are known as permitless carry or constitutional carry, where there's no additional restrictions.
And there's 28 states. More than half of the states are constitutional.
More than half of the states in the United States are constitutional carry now. New Jersey, again, we are probably the most repressive as it relates to that particular right, as compared to almost any state in the nation. No state that I'm aware of has the layered tier of so many steps to go from point A to point Z. So in New Jersey, if you're just somebody who has just woke up one morning and decided, I'm concerned about my safety, I'm concerned about, stepping outside my door into the real world and not being able to protect myself. Maybe I live in a rural part of the state and I'm concerned about police response times. Maybe I just live in a dangerous neighborhood and I want to protect myself. If you're that person and you've never owned a firearm before, you've never gone through that process, right. You do have to go through this. Not just 1, not 2, but 3 separate licensing processes that will cost a substantial sum of money that will take months to complete. So in New Jersey, the first step in the process is you have to obtain what's known as a firearms purchaser ID card. That's sort of like your first stop in the permitting process. So the New Jersey State Police offers a online portal for that. You would go on to the NJFAR's website, you fill out all the information, supply several references for your background check, and then the state police then collects that reference information, and then they complete the first portion of the background check, and then that application gets shifted to your local police department, who then complete the process. And in that, along the way there, you have to complete in this, for at least as far as that permit is concerned, a free training module. So you have to go through this sort of like a PowerPoint presentation on firearm safety, and then
what do they look for? I mean, they look for a criminal background, mental instability, those sort of things.
Yeah, so they're doing all of the things that would typically occur in any background check. I mean, again, if you go to a free state, I spent a portion of my life in New Hampshire with my job in the NRA. In the state of New Hampshire, there are no restrictions whatsoever. When you complete that 4473 that goes to a dealer, that the dealer then transmits to the FBI, they're checking the same exact information. They're checking to see that you have a criminal record, whether or not you have warrants, whether or not you have flagged mental health records, that you've been, adjudicated or have a temporary restraining order. So it's checking all those same things. It's just that in New Hampshire, that occurs in about 30 seconds. In New Jersey, you're put through these extra steps for essentially no additional benefit from a public safety perspective. These are just hurdles that you have to.
Yeah.
So
that's step one.
That would be step one, right? And the next thing, and that process will typically take anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on where you live in the state. And part of that is just literally the police departments are, have limited resources to process these things. And it just takes a long time for a department to get around to you. It's sort of like take a number at the deli counter, and then you sit around for weeks or months in some cases waiting for your name to get called. And then you get that first permission slip. And that first permission slip would allow you to purchase long guns, so rifles and shotguns, that kind of thing. It would allow you to purchase certain types of ammunition, and that's pretty much it. If you then want to get a pistol, which is what you would typically acquire if you're concerned about, protecting yourself outside your home, you then have to then get a second permit, which is a pistol purchase permit, and essentially repeat the same exact process all over again. Get additional references, submit more fees to the state, go through the same process again, wait another 30 to 90 days or possibly even longer, again, depending on where you live. And then that you will get a piece of paper that allows you to purchase one firearm. So you get your pistol purchase permit, you go purchase your firearm, your pistol. If you want a second one, you have to do that all over again.
That is unbelievable.
Wow.
That means all the references again.
All of it, all over again. And in
And
New
if you
Jersey,
have a defense issue and you have an onerous ex-husband, it could be 5 months down the road, and you might be gone before you have a chance to protect yourself. I mean, that's kind of a.
No, it's on some level, the issue you raise is we have seen those exact circumstances play out in the state. There have been women who have domestic violence restraining orders against their significant others, and there was one woman in particular about 10 years ago who, after applying for all of those permits, in between the time that she applied and the time that she would have received all of those permission slips, she was murdered by her ex, and so that cost Carol Bound her life, that process. And so that was during the Christie administration. And to their credit, I mean, they actually did put some steps. They took some measures to speed this process up a little bit.
Right.
But to some degree, that all went out the window a few years ago when New Jersey redid all its laws. So, but nonetheless, like that is certainly a concern, and that's one of the real reasons why some of these, what seems like quote unquote common sense, background check processes are not in fact common sense at all. They're just making the situation more dangerous. But that then takes you to step two, and you still got a third step to go, right? So the final step, if you want to be able to protect yourself outside your home, would be then to obtain a New Jersey carry permit, which is another fee, 4 more references. So that particular, so if we play that in sequence, like a firearm purchaser ID card costs $50. A pistol purchase permit costs $25. A carry permit costs $200 every 2 years. And in addition to repeating these same processes over and over and over again for the third time, the same kind of background check process, you have to complete a training requirement that includes in-person instruction and a live fire, a course of live fire. So you have to go to a shooting range, and you have to pass a qualification that would be along the lines of what a police officer might do every year as part of their continuous qualification process for their job.
Yeah.
And that just the training process itself could cost $200. So when you add all this up, depending on how you've done it, you're talking about spending $600-700 just in fees and other related expenses just to go from 0 to step 3.
It's a revenue producer.
What's that?
A revenue producer for the state.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The state is certainly. I mean, we've seen some of the funds from those. They have at times tried to earmark some of that money for crime victims, but we've seen them sort of take those funds and put it to all sorts of slush fund projects over the years. So yeah, this is just a revenue producer for the state. For the municipalities, it's just a repetitive process that they do over and over and over again. And I should mention, you still haven't actually done the actual federally required Brady check. That occurs at the store when you purchase that pistol. So soup to nuts, you've gone through 4 background checks to exercise one right. Now, I mean, I think even those that would, consider themselves supporters of the Second Amendment, that are supportive of our right to keep and bear arms, I think there's some degree of latitude on the question of whether or not background checks are appropriate. I think as a general matter, even law-abiding gun owners would generally agree with the principle that if you've been adjudicated as dangerous, if you've been convicted as a violent felon, I think there's a compelling argument. I think the Supreme Court, even a very pro-right Supreme Court, would agree that person probably shouldn't be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Right.
But that's not really what we're talking about.
NRA would support that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, as a general matter, we would support the idea, and the Supreme Court would agree that, as they have in recent cases, that, if you've been fully adjudicated through, all of the due process requirements aside, like if you've received due process, you've been adjudicated as somebody who's a danger to themselves or others, you can be temporarily disarmed. I think we can all kind of agree with that as a general principle. But that's not what this is about. That has nothing to do with this is. This is just a process that is designed to be expensive and to frustrate people and ensure that as few people as possible exercise their rights, because that person, that mother of single mom who's concerned about going outside her home with her children, once you learn this whole rigmarole that's associated with going through this process, you just start to throw in the towel on the idea, because it's just so who's got the time to do all of this?
Well, I was going to, with regard to the expense, I know in many cases, $1,000 is too high of a bar. It's not possible for people to come up with that money. And you've essentially taken their Second Amendment rights away from them with process and fees.
Correct.
Yeah. I don't, hasn't that been brought up in court? Have there been cases?
That's certainly something that we're litigating currently, and our partners are litigating currently. But most of these fee increases, they only occurred 4 years ago. So what happened was there was a relatively significant national Supreme Court case brought by the NRA, NYSERPA versus Bruin, which upturned and struck down the Sullivan Act in New York, which was originally introduced almost 100 years ago. And, in that case back then, I mean, it is part of the legislative record when the Sullivan Act was passed. I mean, they put that same restrictive licensing system in place because they specifically didn't want Black and Italian immigrant residents in New York City to exercise their rights. So they created this process specifically so that they could make sure that those people didn't get firearms.
Is it the party that there's no hate home, no hate here? Isn't that discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, the Supreme Court in prior, this is established case law, but I mean, the Supreme Court has struck down a $2 poll tax as being both, inherently discriminatory and unconstitutional. And yet we can take this core constitutional right and hide it behind a paywall. But nonetheless, what was at issue in the NYSERPA versus Bruin was the question of whether or not what's known as a may issue permitting system was constitutional. And so the way the Sullivan Act worked and the way New Jersey law worked prior to 2022 is even if you were willing to pay all those fees, even if you were willing to subject yourself to all of those layers and layers of background checks to establish that you're a responsible person, you would have to then, the final step pre-Bruin is you would have to appear before a court, go before a judge, and demonstrate that you were subject to some unique risk that the court would have to grant you that permit because you were in such dire risk that you had to be able to protect yourself.
So you had to justify it somehow.
And if you couldn't demonstrate that justifiable need, even if you could pass the background check and pay all the fees and go through all that rigmarole, they would deny you that carry permit. And so if we look at the state of New Jersey pre-Bruin, so pre-2022, there was only about 3,000 carry permits issued across the entire state. Post-Bruin, when that system was struck down, we went from 3,000 to over 100,000 carry permits across the state of New Jersey, and that number is growing on a monthly basis. So, and despite all of the, the Pollyanna type, reaction from, the folks on the other side of the aisle on this issue that thought that, well, my God, if New Jersey residents start protecting themselves outside their homes, that New Jersey is going to somehow turn into the Wild West. If you look at crime stats in the state of New Jersey, since those laws were changed and all of those folks stepped out of their homes and were able to protect themselves, crime rates have actually fallen in the state since all of that happened. So despite all of the,
That was a question I wanted to ask. So crime rates have fallen.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of begs the question.
Over 100,000 New Jerseyans are exercising their rights outside their home and carrying firearms in public every day. And crime rates have fallen since that change was put in place.
And have the constitutional carry states found those numbers coming down as well?
Well, we've seen national trends on this, like, the rate of participation in this is a long-term trend, right? Like if we went back to the early 1980s, and to some extent that this is based on decades of hard work by the NRA to expand these carry permit laws in all states across the United States. Texas, for example, it was very difficult to get a carry permit in the 1980s. And you think of Texas as being this sort of very pro-right state, but carrying a firearm outside your home in Texas wasn't really possible until the 1990s. So, things have changed quite a bit since the 1980s to today. And again, despite all of the, the sort of theatrics of the politics of the left on this issue, we've seen a radical increase in Americans exercising their rights every day, not just in New Jersey, but across the United States. And there has been no sort of correlation to an increase in crime as a result of that. If in large part, crime rates have fallen over that long period of time. If we look at violent crime rates in the United States, they hit an absolute peak in 1990, and they've steadily fallen from that high ever since.
Yeah,
and that's in the face of millions of Americans exercising their rights every day. So that idea that responsible people protecting themselves somehow leads to an increase in crime is facially absurd. Like it doesn't make sense that would possibly would be the outcome of that. But putting aside the logical error in that, I mean, the statistics just simply don't back it up.
Yeah. My son is in Arizona, and in Arizona, it's not even concealed carry. They carry on the hip, and for someone in New Jersey, in Arizona, it's an odd look. It's quite a sight. It's a little intimidating, but I guess it's just a natural thing in Arizona that there are signs in the house that say we don't call 911. So if somebody's going to break in, that they're going to meet a gun. So.
Well, as I said, I mean, I'm a part-time resident of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is one of the most pro-right states in the nation, and there is open carry there too. It's not a shock to the system to see someone out in public protecting themselves, and that's just a cultural problem, right? Like in free America, this is an everyday thing that's just part of life. There's obvious pearl clutching in a state like New Jersey. That the idea that people should be able to protect themselves outside their home is somehow alarming to folks, which is on some level a really sad way to think about life. The fact that I should be concerned that my neighbor or someone else in my community values their own life and the lives of everyone in their community, and they're taking steps to protect themselves. The idea that should be somehow jarring is absurd. But yeah, free America, that's just an everyday part of life. I spent a lot of time working in the Statehouse in Concord, New Hampshire, and there are no metal detectors at the Statehouse in Concord. You are welcome to carry a firearm into legislative chambers and sessions, and there are many lawmakers who carry firearms every day there, and yet there is no Wild West. There is nothing unusual about that. It is just part of life in America that New Jersey residents really were shielded from for a long time. Like I said, pre-Bruin, pre-2022, we really didn't have a constitutional right in the state of New Jersey. It was that restrictive. No one could truly exercise it. You can get a hunting gun. You can go duck hunting. That was pretty much it. Yeah, the fact that now we live in a freer state is a cultural adaptation that the state is going through. But as I said, all the concerns about what the impact of that would be are just not playing out the way that those on the other side of the issue would project. In fact, it's been the polar opposite.
Okay, a lot of people don't know this. This is interesting.
Yeah. So once you get the concealed carry, there's a risk now, even traveling within the state, and God forbid you leave the state into another state, right? You cannot carry anywhere in a school zone, and if I'm not mistaken, you can't bring a gun into Whole Foods. I think there's a sign there that says no foods allowed and that sort of thing, which seems odd to me. That it seems if you have all the credentials, that they shouldn't be taking that right away, but I don't know.
Well, that is certainly the version of things that Trenton wanted. So in terms of the timeline of this, in June of 2022, the Supreme Court struck down New York's law and indirectly struck down New Jersey's law. We had cases that were up on appeal alongside the New York case, and simultaneously the Supreme Court ruled on the issue nationally. And in June of 2022, all of those rights were restored to folks across the Garden State. But of course, Trenton being Trenton, Democrats in the state being the Democrats that they are, we're just not going to sit there and allow that to happen. So in a sort of visceral reaction to the idea that there should be some degree of rights restoration in the state, they quickly ran to the printing press and started, running up bills to put out what this sort of like Bruin reaction, right. And so as a consequence of the Bruin decision, A4769 was drafted and in that fall session. And that was a sort of a large omnibus bill that reformed a lot of the New Jersey laws as it relates to carrying firearms. And so in that law, they expanded and created what you referred to as a sundry list of quote unquote sensitive locations, quote unquote gun-free zones, where by state statute, even if you have a carry permit, you're not permitted to carry in these specific locations. Some of them are the obvious ones that in some respects are mirrored in federal law. So for example, there is a federal gun-free zones rule as it relates to schools. And, and again, in a free state, there are exceptions to that. So if you have an actual carry permit, you're largely exempted from the federal restriction. But federal law does create a gun-free zone for schools. The obvious other places that one would expect to be a sort of quote unquote gun-free zones would be, the places where you would typically encounter a metal detector, right? Like if you go to a courthouse, if you go to a legislative chamber, those places would traditionally be considered gun-free zones, but that's not where the state stopped, right? They're clearly their goal was to try to define almost every square inch of the state of New Jersey as a gun-free zone. So they attempted.
Penn Medicine in Cherry Hill, if you go through a metal detector, if you have a gun.
So hospitals, medical facilities, a whole laundry list of places were listed out in that response bill. We participated heavily in the legislation itself. We testified multiple times in both House and Senate Judiciary and other committee hearings that fall. But ultimately, the writing was on the wall. There was no way we were going to stop the Democrats from passing that bill. And in January of 2023, then Governor Phil Murphy signed that bill into law. That afternoon, as the ink was drying on that bill, we filed a federal lawsuit challenging the entire system. And we had a temporary restraining order and then ultimately a preliminary injunction that prevented most of the most pernicious parts of that law from going into effect. And those portions of the bill have been enjoined since the bill was passed.
Right.
So, for example, they did attempt to try to define, to create what we refer to as a quote unquote vampire rule, which is to say, the state law would flip the presumption. So if you're a private business and you're a business that is open to the public, the law would create the presumption that it would be no carry unless that particular business designated itself in some way as a place where carrying firearms was permitted, as opposed to the obvious inverse of that, which is to say that the presumption should be that if it's held open to the public, unless that private property owner has posted it as no guns are permitted here, the presumption in the law would be that, well, I can carry a firearm there unless the property owner has somehow otherwise restricted that.
Yeah. So you'd have to bring
aspect
as you traveled around New Jersey. You'd have to have your.
We thought we would dive into that more because I know this is going back and forth. This bill. We're going to take a break, I think, and we want to dive more into the challenges on that and the more recent decision of something that occurred just in July on another matter, right?
Yep.
So shall we do that, Mr. Producer?
America's Pulse Network. Amplify your voice with the premier conservative podcast network. Are you a standard bearer for liberty, free markets, and traditional values? Stop fighting the algorithms alone. Join a powerhouse community of like-minded creators dedicated to uncensored truth and professional growth. Here is why to partner with us. Who are we looking for? Ready to scale your podcast? Then apply today to protect your voice and grow your audience.
Okay, so we were talking about Bill 4769 that's had several challenges, and as I understand it, it's still vacated, not resolved. Right?
That's correct. Yeah. So that bill was we received preliminary injunctions in the spring of 2023 that have enjoined significant portions of the law. The state then appealed that preliminary injunction to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and it has been in a state of appeal since 2023. So here we are 3 years later, and we're still technically pending at the Third Circuit on that issue. But as you mentioned before the break there, we had in the post-Bruin world, one of the most significant NRA victories in any court in the United States just last July, when the Third Circuit ruled on another case that came up post-Bruin, challenging New Jersey's restrictions on quote-unquote assault firearms and large capacity magazines. And the Third Circuit Court of Appeals just last month struck down both of those bans as unconstitutional. That is far and away one of the biggest victories in the U.S., especially in a post-Bruin world. No circuit court has thus far ruled on the question of assault firearms, assault weapons, and what we would deem standard capacity magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. We're the first circuit in the nation to take the Bruin methodology and the precedent that was established in NYSERPA versus Bruin and honestly and faithfully apply it in evaluating some of these more onerous restrictions in states like New Jersey. But we are proud to report that we did achieve that victory, and it's just a symbol of where things are headed from a legal perspective across the state.
Can you tell us what qualifies as an assault weapon?
Yeah,
because the name sounds onerous too. If it's an assault weapon, it kind of makes me say, well, maybe,
Yeah. I mean, this has been a centerpiece of the Bloomberg and George Soros funded anti-rights gun control agenda for decades. This notion that we should restrict the types of firearms that Americans can choose to protect themselves and others. And the origin story of this goes back to the early 1990s. New Jersey's law was actually passed before the federal assault weapons ban was passed in 1994. Ours was passed in 1990, so 4 years prior. It is an absurdity, right? What is an assault firearm? No one can truly define what that is. In the initial pass, the law restricted the ownership of certain named firearm types and brands. So, for example, the most iconic of those would be the Colt AR-15, and New Jersey, by name, banned the possession of the Colt AR-15. An AR-15, for folks out there, there is nothing unusual about a Colt AR-15. It is a civilian firearm. It is a semi-automatic firearm that accepts detachable magazines. There are a million variations of firearms out there that functionally do the same thing and are no more or less dangerous than a Colt branded AR-15. Those are perfectly legal to own, but anything that's branded as a Colt AR-15 is not. So even the way the law was originally written, even Colt as a manufacturer, you couldn't purchase something labeled and stamped as a Colt AR-15, but you could buy a Colt AR-556 or an AR something other, as long as it didn't say Colt AR-15. Today, I mean, New Jersey residents, even under this relatively restrictive system, the AR-15 pattern rifles are some of the most popular rifles in the state, and certainly some of the most popular rifles in America. There's over nearly 30 million of those rifles in circulation across the U.S. There's hundreds of thousands of them in civilian hands in New Jersey. We just have to go through this relatively annoying compliance process where certain features are adjusted. So like you can't have an adjustable stock and you can't have certain devices threaded onto the barrel, but functionally it's the same exact thing. The assault weapons and the terminology that goes along with that has been part of a propaganda machine that has been funded and fueled by our political opponents for decades. And it has no public policy objective that anyone can identify. It does nothing to make us safer. It just restricts commonly owned firearms that Americans purchase and use lawfully across the United States every day. And these restrictions, as I said, have been in place since 1990. And thankfully, again, through decades of litigation, the case in question is ANJRPC versus Davenport. That case was originally filed in 2018. And so we had been litigating on that case for nearly 10 years. And that was on appeal with the Bruin case. It was one of the cases that got quote unquote GBR'd after Bruin. So it was on appeal with the Supreme Court. They decided the Bruin case, and then they basically sent it back down to the Third Circuit and said, do this over in light of the fact that we just ruled in Bruin. You need to reevaluate this case. And so it has been in a state of flux, as I said, for nearly a decade at this point. And after a decade of hard work and a lot of money, we finally have achieved a victory on that issue. So
the victory was what? The size of the magazine? Was that?
Both. So it struck down New Jersey's assault firearm restrictions as it relates to rifles.
Okay.
And it struck down New Jersey's ban on quote-unquote large capacity magazines, which the state defines as anything that holds more than 10 rounds.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So, so that's a big deal. And will that go national across the country, or what's the future of
the timing on this issue is particularly interesting because at the close of the last Supreme Court term, the Supreme Court granted cert in two cases, one called Viramontes, the other called Grant versus Lamont, which were both challenges to Cook County's restrictions on assault weapons, which is out of Illinois, and then Connecticut's ban on assault weapons. So the Supreme Court has granted cert. Oral arguments are going to be heard on those cases this fall.
Okay.
And come next June, most folks that are watching this, even our opponents, are, would recognize that in light of the way the Supreme Court has been ruling on the issue, they're very likely going to strike down both Illinois and Connecticut's assault weapon bans next June, and that will obviously settle the issue here in New Jersey too. The state did request a stay in the case, so the gun owners in New Jersey can't quite run out to the store and buy standard magazines or buy non-neutered assault weapons just yet. But that is
common. Stay against their own decision.
Yeah, so it is common for if a party in a case like this is going to seek review by a higher court, it is just sort of common practice for a circuit court to stay its decision pending the decision by the Supreme Court as to whether or not they're going to grant cert. And in all likelihood, because the Supreme Court's already granted cert on the issue, they will likely take New Jersey's appeal and hold on to it until they've decided both Viramontes and Grant next year. But it is extremely influential on the Supreme Court in that, circuit courts in other parts of the United States, like the Ninth Circuit, the Seventh Circuit, Ninth Circuit being California, Seventh Circuit being Illinois, and Fourth Circuit down in Maryland, they have consistently found that even in light of Bruin, that these quote unquote assault weapon bans are somehow consistent with the Second Amendment. The Third Circuit is the first circuit court in the United States that has ruled the other way and said, we're going to faithfully apply Supreme Court jurisprudence on this issue. And in doing so, we find that these laws are unconstitutional.
Wow. There are a couple other terms maybe our audience would like to know about before we're moving along. We've got maybe 8 to 10 minutes left. There are a couple other terms we wanted to talk about. Suppressors?
Yep.
What is this? Can you give us 2 or 3 lines on what is the law regarding suppressors? What is that?
Sure. So a suppressor is an attachment to a firearm that reduces the report of the firearm. Now, again, this is another term and another, the other side would typically refer to those as silencers. Hollywood has done an incredible job completely misrepresenting what suppressors actually do. They do not actually make a firearm silent. So the things you've seen in James Bond movies are just, there's no nexus to reality in any of that. A suppressor is nothing more than the functional equivalent of the muffler that's on your car. In fact, Maxim Percy, the person who invented the suppressor, also invented the muffler for your car. So it's the same technology essentially.
Okay.
It's taking some of the gases that are leaving the barrel, it's trapping them in a series of baffles inside of the suppressor, and it reduces the sound from something that is dangerous from a hearing perspective to something that is slightly more tolerable. But it certainly doesn't make them silent. It's not a weapon that's used by assassins or whatever Hollywood wants to portray these things as. Suppressors are illegal in 42 states in the United States. There's over 6 million suppressors in circulation. Hunters use suppressors across the United States. For many of us, hunting in the field, you're not going to put ear protection on while you're hunting because you're obviously attempting to, maintain a high degree of situational awareness so that you can, track and monitor game that you're hopefully going to take. So hunters don't typically use any hearing protection, but even exposure to the sound of a firearm, even once, does permanent damage. So the whole point of having a suppressor on is it functionally is a safety device more than anything. It makes using a firearm for any purpose safer. Nonetheless, New Jersey bans and restricts those as well.
Oh, of course.
We filed a federal lawsuit last year challenging New Jersey's restrictions on suppressors. And as you mentioned, just a few weeks ago in July, the Third Circuit struck down New Jersey's assault weapon ban. We filed our motion for summary judgment on that case last Friday, citing heavily the ANJRPC case. So you can see we have this sort of stack of dominoes, and they're all kind of falling in line here.
Right.
That is in large part thanks to the fact that we have perhaps the perfect combination of things. And this is, I think, the sliver of hope that I can offer to gun owners across the state of New Jersey. We have an extremely anti-rights administration. We have an extremely anti-rights legislature, but nonetheless, we have one of the most favorable and conservative circuit courts in the United States. If you think of some of the other more prominently conservative courts, you think of circuit courts like the Fifth Circuit, which covers states like Texas. The problem there is that you have conservative judges in Texas, but they're not dealing with these issues very much because states like Texas just simply don't pass these laws.
Yeah.
Right.
But thanks to a series of vacancies that were filled by the Trump administration, we now have a very, very solid majority at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. We have an 8-6 conservative majority at the Third Circuit, which gives us a very, very positive environment to pursue litigation in the state. And we have the combination of that plus a state with just mountains of gun control. And so it is fair, it is open season on the state of New Jersey's gun control regime, and we're prepared to continuously sue them until we've clawed back every single one of our rights. And we have a clear pathway to do so.
Actually, on that positive note, Joe, we're going to have to wrap it up because we're going to run out of time here pretty soon. So this has been a great conversation.
This is very, very, very informative. Jack and I keep on top of things, but there's a ton we learned tonight, and we hope our viewers did as well. And thank you very much for coming. Yes.
So your website for the viewers?
Yeah, so certainly track our work here in the state at njfos.org. That's New Jersey Firearm Owners Syndicate. I would also encourage your listeners track everything that the NRA is doing here too. It's and in particular, it would be the NRA's Institute for Legislative Action. So that's nraila.org. And if you go on that website, make sure that you're signing up for all of our action alerts to make sure that you're staying apprised as to the shifting landscape here, because there is a lot underway. We've got lots of good things to deliver in courts, but I would certainly anticipate that in light of the fact that we're achieving gains in the courthouse, that the legislature will come back next session and attempt to do what they did in 2023.
Well, thank you for showing up. And we'll keep in conversation with you.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well.
So, are we at a break here, Mr. Producer, or are we jumping right in on? Okay, so we have some guests coming up.
Yes, we do.
And let's see, we have on the screen there, we have Rosemary Becky, which will be on August 25th. She is the founder of Jersey First. And for me personally, this is going to be a learning experience as well to find out what Jersey First is all about, because I see it all over the place.
Right, right. They're very active, and
they are.
We're anxious for that. And then we have Senator Testa coming, Michael Testa, who's been very active in our legislature. You've seen him maybe on Facebook making some noise about the 6,600 and who knows how many more voter on our voter rolls. So he's been very vocal on several things, actually.
Yeah, he's one of the most popular political figures, I think, in the state of New Jersey. I've seen his name floated around for governor. We've had a lot of folks from the assembly, so it'll be nice having
having a senator on board.
side.
And then later we're going to have a couple ladies who are very versed on the human trafficking issue.
Right.
Will speak out about.
We're going to be doing a special show
on that.
Normally we are the second and fourth Tuesday
Right.
of each month. But in September, there's an extra
There's 5
Tuesday.
Tuesdays, so
So-
we're going to grab that last Tuesday.
That last Tuesday, we're going to focus on human trafficking in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be a good one.
Okay.
Anything else you want to say in German? Say good night.
I don't think people want to hear me say any more in German, but aber guten Nacht, es war schön, hier zu sein und wir sehen Ihnen nächstes Mal. Wir
Okay.
sehen Sie nächstes Mal.
Good night. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the New Jersey Statehouse Watch. Join Jack Brangan and Constance Ditzel every second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 7:30 p.m. Watch the show live at njstatehousewatch.com or listen anytime. Download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time on the New Jersey Statehouse Watch.